Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Lunatics Radio Hour podcast. My name is Abby Brinker. I'm sitting here with Alan Kudan.
Hello.
On the morning of February 9th, 1855, in Devon, England, locals woke to find strange tracks in the freshly fallen snow.
Is that uncommon?
Well, there was something about these tracks that were different than usual.
It was a dog.
So Devon in 1855 was largely rural. It was made up of small villages, farms, and market towns scattered across the countryside. The region was no stranger to harsh winter weather, but the snowfall that arrived that night, the night of February 8th, was significant enough to leave a fresh, unbroken blanket of snow. The tracks that were found were traced across fields, gardens, and village lanes, and ran a single line of unusual hoof-like impressions. At first, people assumed the tracks belonged to some kind of animal.
Like a moose.
But that's where things get strange. The tracks appeared in more than 30 locations across Devon. They formed a single file line and measured roughly 4 inches long and about 1.5 inches or 2.5 inches wide, depending on the report. Witnesses estimated the trail of prints extended between 40 and 100 miles. The tracks seemed to ignore natural and man-made barriers, passing directly over houses, rivers, haystacks, and walls. The footprints appeared on snow-covered rooftops and atop tall walls, and some reported that they entered and emerged from drain pipes that were barely 4 inches across. Some believed the tracks belonged to the devil himself. Today we are talking about the strange incident of the devil's footprints of 1855.
I'm confused. That's my statement.
Why are you confused?
Why would they think it was the devil? Does he have very little feet?
Well, they were normal. They were actually tracks that would be, I think, somewhat bigger than normal animal tracks, like fox tracks or something. These were bigger, but
He's got a size 4 foot.
4-inch foot.
Your shoe size correlates to like the number of inches of how long your foot is.
Yeah, but the hoof is the whole foot. You know?
The hoof.
The hoof.
Yeah, you know lots about hooves.
Ooh, that's true. We do like to watch a lot of Nate the Hoof Guy.
He's great.
He's great. No, I think what's felt unnerving and out of place to these people is that, A, there was this track, right? These tracks that were single file tracks. And there's a bunch of diagrams I'll show you that they drew at the time that ran somewhere between 40 to 100 miles across different areas of Devon. So it's almost like waking up in the morning and like, you know, what animal is traveling 100 miles? What singular animal overnight? Just in the time between the snow, when the snow stopped falling. And they seemed to travel over places that were impossible. Like it would just go, the tracks would lead right up to a house and then over the roof of the house and then along the other side of the house, as if something just like jumped on top of the house, or through this like very small drain pipe that a normal person couldn't fit or a normal animal couldn't fit through, or on top of garden walls. Like it was not like they were like, oh, there's some tracks in the backyard. Like there was A, 100 miles of tracks, and B, tracks that nobody really identified as, oh, we know exactly what that animal is. And then C, the tracks ran all over the place, like through things they shouldn't possibly have been able to get through, on top of roofs, on top of high places. So that's why these tracks are special tracks.
This was what year?
1855 in England.
1855. Okay. Who measured the overall length of the prints?
So we're going to get into it. There's some diagrams, like I said, that people kind of sketched up to show. Here, let me find one to bring you into the fold here.
Well, so while you're looking that up, I'm just thinking about this because, there's no satellite imagery. They can't do it after the fact. They have to measure this. I see. Okay. I mean, yeah, it looks like hoof prints. They have to do all their measurements before anybody like walks around and ruins the prints, or, before the snow melts or just, the tracks get spoiled. So somebody had to go around town and then report back to the mayor and be like, yeah, I measured it. It was 100 miles.
No, and so the length, the distance of it, I'll say, is estimated. That's why the range is 40 to 100 miles. But essentially, there are all these reports that came in from all these different parts of, areas of this locality. And so they've pieced it together. But let's get into, I feel like you have a lot of logistics questions.
I sure do.
So let's get into a little bit deeper. But first, let's talk about our sources. a Mental Floss article by Stacy Conrad, The Ongoing Mystery of the Devil's Footprints, a Discovery Global Geopark article on the Devil's Footprints, and a Discovery article, The Mystery of the Devil's Footprints. And there's a few first-hand sources that we will cite as we go. The Devil's Footprints were reported in a period of rapid change in Britain, when railways were expanding, photography was increasingly used, and scientific explanations were becoming more prominent. At the same time, rural areas such as Devon still retained strong folk traditions that influenced how unusual events were interpreted. What's interesting to me about this topic and topics like this is less about whether or not we believe it was the devil, right? I think most people would say it probably wasn't the devil.
I think I would say it's probably not the devil.
But to me, what's interesting, especially through the lens of this podcast, is to look at how people and why people are reacting to something the way that they are at that time. And what's really interesting about this specific case is that it's at this like kind of fork in the road moment for Europe, right? Where you have industry, you have science, you have all of these things that are coming in, but there's still this lingering superstition and, way to explain the world through religion or through, other things beyond science. It's like kind of like this melding moment. And so I think that's going to be really interesting to keep in mind as we talk through the rest of the history.
Well, sure. It comes at a time that's pre-internet. They have no memes.
Yeah. And to me, it feels sure. But to me, it feels like somewhat similar to like the spring-heeled Jack, or even, this is older, but the celestial lights over Nuremberg, which we talked about more recently, because there are some sources that we have. And again, we're going to read a little bit of something, but it just makes it more interesting because you get that firsthand perspective or even a secondhand perspective of why people are trying to explain this through superstition or the supernatural instead of through, natural and scientific ways.
I bet they just went down to the pub or the church or wherever they all gather. Somebody says, I found all the hoof prints and I'm pretty sure it's the devil. And someone says, oh yeah, I found hoof prints too. It must be the devil. And then it spreads like wildfire. This is the old-timey equivalent of a TikTok video.
Sure.
Did you know that if you find hoof prints, it means that the devil walked around your land?
Well, what's interesting about this is that it wasn't just, so it certainly spread locally, right? Word of mouth, like exactly what you're saying. But it also spread rapidly, not just across England, but across the world. Newspapers in Australia were reprinting reports just a few months later. So on May 26, 1855, Bell's Life in Sydney reprinted an account from the Weekly Dispatch, which had first reported on the story in its February 18th issue. So here we go. Let's get into the mindset of the time. Quote, the superstitious go so far as to believe that they are the marks of Satan himself, and that great excitement has been produced among all classes, may be judged from the fact that the subject has been descanted on from the pulpit. It appears on Thursday last night there was a very heavy snowfall in the neighborhood of Exeter in the south of Devon. On the following morning, the inhabitants of the above towns were surprised at discovering the footmarks of some strange and mysterious animal endowed with the power of ubiquity. As the footprints were to be seen in all kinds of unaccountable places, on the tops of houses and narrow walls, in gardens and courtyards, enclosed by high walls and palings, as well as in open fields. Jumping ahead a little, the impressions of the foot closely resembled that of a donkey's shoe. It does look like a horseshoe when you look at the drawings, and measured from 1.5 inches to, in some instances, 2.5 inches across. Here and there, it appeared as if cloven, but in the generality of the steps, the shoe was continuous, and from the snow in the center remaining entire, merely showing the outer crest of the foot, it must have been concave, end quote.
Okay, so basically, like horseshoe prints.
Exactly. That's exactly what it looks like.
Okay, I already have my theory.
Okay, tell us.
Is it time?
Tell us now, and then when we get to theories, we'll all laugh at you.
Okay, you remember that guy? This is once again, this is a very half-baked story because I don't remember all of my facts. But there was some guy for decades that was walking around a beach at night with like these wooden boards strapped to his feet that made it look like it was like the world's largest sea turtle or something. And for decades, scientists were like trying to find this turtle. I think it was a turtle because it would like break all records for like biggest turtle ever, but they could never find it. Obviously, they weren't trying all that hard, but you know, this was a goal. And it wasn't until the guy was like very, very late in life that he like came clean that this was effectively a practical joke of him walking around planting these tracks on this beach.
So you think it's somebody wearing like horseshoes under their shoes?
Sure.
How are they getting on tops of roofs and into locked back gardens?
How would they get there anyways? They had to build those things. People live there.
Yeah, but this person doesn't have a ladder or key to this house. If there's a ladder, we would have seen that in the snow.
I don't think it's one person doing it.
You think it's a huge, massive hoax?
I think it's one person did it, and then there's a bunch of copycat. Everyone.
It all happened in one night. It happened in one
everybody
evening.
has horseshoes.
It happened in one night.
Yeah.
So you think, how would there be copycats?
Word of mouth. Hey, did you have a bunch of devil prints? Oh yeah, I had a bunch of devil prints. Can we come look at them? Yeah, give me like an hour.
I think your understanding of how people communicated and how...
They all have to get together at church.
Yeah.
So they have time.
Okay.
They don't call each other.
Fabulous. Let's see what day of the week this was. It was a Thursday.
Thursday. Where do people gather on... Can you Google where do people gather on Thursdays in the 1800s?
In 1855, people gathered for community, news, and socializing, primarily in taverns, general stores, markets, and meeting houses. Does not specify Thursdays.
Okay, so all those things exist on Thursdays. They probably all got together, had some pints, and then decided they're going to put some hoof prints everywhere.
I'm seeing a lot of holes in that, but that's okay. To each our own. To a modern audience, it might seem like quite a leap to look at a strange set of footprints and conclude that Satan himself had walked across the English countryside.
I think that's fair.
But to understand why so many people entertained that possibility, we have to understand the world they lived in. Rural communities in England and around Europe at the time, like those in Devon, were still deeply rooted in centuries of folklore and the Christian belief. For many people, the devil wasn't just a symbolic figure. Remember, this is only 160 years after the English Civil War, not that long after the last witch trials, and long before modern forensic science. These communities still lived in a world where folklore wasn't entertainment, it was how they explained everyday life.
I thought you were going to say before Modern Friends, starring Rachel and Ross and Phoebe.
No, starring Jennifer Aniston as Rachel. The devil was considered a real and active force capable of tempting, deceiving, and even physically manifesting in the world. Sermons frequently warned about Satan's influence, and stories of supernatural encounters had been passed down for generations.
Okay, but why would the devil walk around that much land? It seems so inefficient.
The devil likes to get some fresh air, too.
Yeah, but he could just fly on his big bat wings.
Well, he's trying to get his
made
steps
of
in.
the skin of sinners.
Yeah, he wants to get his steps in, though.
Okay, so this was to fill the Fitbit.
Exactly.
Sorry, he was trying to close his rings.
That's right.
That's the 9 circles of hell.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's also interesting. I think when people are like, oh, man, that's the devil, it's like typically they're either assuming that their neighbors, or they feel some guilt for something, or assuming that their neighbors maybe did something wrong to attract, so I think that's like an interesting piece of this that's a little bit missing in the history and the firsthand sources that we have. Like, usually when people are like, oh, witch or devil, it's like because they think that person, either they don't like them, they're an outsider, they want their land, there's like a reason.
That person wore a blue ribbon in their hair.
Devil. I have to say, I've been watching Widow's Bay on Apple, and in the first episode, my favorite line, I really like it. I really like the series. There's like, this is not a spoiler at all, but there's like a little moment where they're at the town historical society, and she's like, oh, look at our witch trial exhibit. Like, we're so proud of it. We caught them and we burned them.
You do like that line.
I think it's delightful. Okay. So legends of ghostly black dogs, fairy paths, witches, and omens still circulated throughout the English countryside at this time. The line between folklore and everyday life was far blurrier than it is today. It's also important to remember that people weren't immediately crying devil. Contemporary newspapers show that many tried to find an ordinary explanation first. But the more unusual the reports became, especially the claims that the tracks crossed rooftops, high walls, and frozen rivers without interruption, the harder they became to explain. For some, the supernatural simply filled the gaps, where reason seemed to fall short, just as all urban legends tend to do. Considering how famous the incident became, it's surprising how little original evidence survives today.
It's fresh snow. Like, it's not going to survive.
Yeah, but just more in terms of written testimonial.
They couldn't even write.
They could write.
They could read.
This
They could not
1855.
read nor write.
Oh my God.
In this country, over half are still illiterate.
This is in England.
Is that true?
The home of Oxford.
What is the illiteracy rate in the U.S.?
21%.
21%.
Additionally, around 54 of American adults read below a 6th grade level. That's really a bummer.
I think that's where I was getting my half statistic.
Yeah.
That's kind of horrifying.
Yeah, this was a bit of a... Much of what historians know comes from a collection of documents that resurfaced nearly a century later after a 1950 article in the Transactions of the Devonshire Association asked readers to share any surviving information about the mystery. The search uncovered a collection of papers belonging to Henry Thomas Ellacombe, who served as the vicar of Kleist St. George during the 1850s. Included were letters from fellow clergymen, a draft letter intended for the Illustrated London News marked not for publication, and traced sketches of the mysterious hoofprints themselves. In 1994, historian Mike Dash gathered virtually every surviving primary and secondary source into a study called The Devil's Hoofmarks, Source Material on the Great Devon Mystery of 1855. Even today, it's considered one of the most complete collections of evidence surrounding the case. In order to understand why the footprints caused such a stir in the first place, it's important to understand the setting. One of the biggest challenges in explaining the devil's footprints is that historians aren't even convinced there's a single trail to explain. Although newspapers claimed the tracks stretched anywhere from 40 to 100 miles, no one person actually followed the entire route.
Aha!
Modern researchers point out that the reports came from dozens of different witnesses, often describing different shapes, sizes, and distances between the prints.
Okay. Mystery solved. This wasn't the devil. It was Santa.
Well, it kind of feels like Santa. It's in February, but it kind of feels like that. Like you wake up and you're like, oh my God, something happened.
Reindeer.
Something happened last night. That has led some historians, including Mike Dash, to suggest that the famous trail was really a collection of separate incidents that newspapers combined into one extraordinary story.
Aha!
Dash argued that some of the tracks were probably hoaxes, while others were likely made by perfectly ordinary animals whose footprints had been distorted by melting snow or unusual weather conditions. If that's the case, then the famous 100-mile trail may have never existed, even if many individual footprints did. But let's suspend disbelief for a minute and talk through some of the other possibilities.
This is my specialty.
Many of the leading theories involve animals. One of the earliest came from the renowned naturalist Richard Owen, who believed badgers were the most likely culprit.
Badgers?
He argued that badgers leave surprisingly large prints for their size and are stealthy nocturnal animals capable of covering long distances while searching for food.
Badgers. But badgers are famous for their giant hooves.
Maybe they're not famous for them, but this guy who's a naturalist knows about
Abby,
them.
badgers don't have hooves.
I think he's saying that they got like distorted with the melting snow a little bit.
Okay,
Yeah, they're like little feet. They have normal like little feet.
they got paws.
They got paws, yeah.
Yeah, very different than hooves.
Mike Dash revisited another Victorian theory involving wood mice. This one, I think, is one of the strongest ones. When mice bound or jump through fresh snow, their hind feet often land ahead of their front feet, creating an imprint that can resemble a tiny cloven hoof. Let me get you a picture, Alan.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it looks like rabbit tracks. Yeah, I mean, sure, this is plausible. This does coincide with the Great Field Mouse Marathon of 1855.
Well,
so
there you have
maybe, you know, they did also find thousands of field mice with little numbers pinned to them.
An article published just weeks after the incident in the Illustrated London News even included diagrams showing how rodent tracks could produce hoof-shaped impressions under certain snow conditions. One rumor claimed that 2 kangaroos had escaped from a private menagerie near Sidmouth and were responsible for the mysterious tracks.
I think this is the most plausible.
The story gained enough traction that it was mentioned in contemporary newspapers. But the Reverend G.M. Musgrove later admitted he never truly believed it happened at all.
I was really hoping his name was going to be GM Muskrat.
And it was him all along. Instead,
It's a Scooby-Doo situation.
Yeah, it was...
He's trying to scare people away from the town so that he can build his shopping mall or something.
That's right. Instead, he intentionally repeated the rumor because many of his parishioners had become convinced the devil himself had walked across Devon. If people were willing to blame a kangaroo instead of Satan, he considered that an improvement.
This is imagine. Hey, Ronan, hear me out. What if it was a kangaroo? Huh?
I mean, the kangaroo might be the most because they can jump.
I don't think kangaroos do great in the snow.
Yeah, but that's why they're running. They're trying
For
to
100 miles.
They're trying to get free. Yeah.
Look at kangaroo tracks. It looks very different.
Just looks like human feet, kind of.
Kangaroos are crazy animals.
Yeah, I know. I'm scared of them.
Why?
Have you seen them like beat up people and each other? They're like super jacked. Have you seen like kangaroos fighting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that.
And they disembowel with their little talons on their bottom feet.
Yeah, I am too afraid of them.
And they choke out dogs and drag them into the water.
Yeah, it's horrible.
It's kind of wild.
Yeah, they're very violent.
I did hug a kangaroo.
Why?
If you had the opportunity,
I know, but I mean, what was the situation?
I was there with a kangaroo.
Where?
Someone said you can hug him, and so I hugged the kangaroo.
He hugged you back?
Yeah, he was like a little hugging kangaroo.
Where were you?
This is in Australia.
You're at a zoo?
It was a kangaroo. I guess it was a zoo, but like it was just kangaroos there.
Sure.
Sorry, no, that's not true. They had kangaroos and they had emus.
It's like when we went to the wolf reserve.
Yeah, but that was to rehabilitate them and put them into the wild. But like that's great. Kangaroos in Australia are like deer. They are absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
It's actually somewhere between deer and squirrels. They are all over the place, which like normally you picture the foreign land, with all these exotic animals, and like that doesn't actually exist. But in Australia, they are. Kangaroos are everywhere.
Yeah, I have no interest in ever going to Australia, and I say that with all the love to all of my Aussie friends, but I'm so afraid of the wildlife in Australia. It really, really scares me.
I mean, all you have to do is stay in the cities and you're okay. It's just when you kind of get into the outback.
But I have a friend who's Australian, and she said that even in Sydney, her parents, they have these massive spiders, and I'm just not interested.
Sure.
Just not interested.
Okay,
It just
fair.
freaks me out. Anyway.
But fewer kangaroos in Sydney.
Okay, well, that's good. Something.
You still see them along the highways.
Years after the incident, author Gregory Household proposed that the
These names.
proposed that the mysterious prince may have been created by an experimental balloon that accidentally broke free from the Devonport dockyard.
I'm sorry, what?
According to a story passed down through a local family, the balloon, like a military balloon, had been tethered with ropes ending in heavy metal shackles. As it drifted across the countryside, those shackles supposedly skipped and bounced across the snow, leaving behind a trail of evenly spaced impressions. The same account even claimed the military quietly covered up the accident because the runaway balloon damaged greenhouses, conservatories, and windows before finally coming down near Honiton. But there are obvious problems with this theory. If a balloon were dragging ropes and metal shackles behind it for dozens of miles, it's difficult to imagine them not snagging on trees, fences, or buildings long before completing the journey. The theory also doesn't explain why witnesses described the impressions as distinct hoof prints rather than random marks left by swinging metal.
Seems plausible. If it was maybe not just like a bobbing balloon, but more of like a military dirigible driven by the devil, then he could kind of pilot it around and put the little prints wherever he wants.
That's true. That's a good point.
A dirigible piloted by the devil with a bunch of ropes to leave hoof prints on roofs.
Listen, I think in my heart of hearts that it's a combination, as always, right? Like, I think maybe because people probably didn't go up to their roofs and like inspect these with a magnifying glass, maybe the weather balloon did skim across some roofs and there was some strange footprints from, the mice or whatever it is on the ground. And so when people all woke up that morning and they saw, like, oh my God, this looks like, I think it could be multiple things happened to happen in the same night.
Okay, so it's like half Santa, half the devil, with a mixture of just random hoof prints, right?
Yeah, that's my theory.
We've reinvented
I
Krampus.
guess Santa's not part of it for me. Again, it's February. It's
Yeah.
not. We're not in Christmas time.
Oh yeah, no, like going across, up and down drain pipes, across rooftops. He sees you when you're sleeping.
Yeah, it's pretty spooky. And that's really where the mystery still stands today. Nearly every theory can explain one part of the story, whether it's the shape of the prints, their appearance on rooftops, or the sheer number of reports. But none can comfortably explain every detail recorded in the newspapers of 1855, if you believe in those reports. Whether the devil's footprints were made by mice, badgers, an escaped military balloon, or a series of unrelated animal tracks, or something we'll never fully understand, the story has endured for nearly 175 years. What's more interesting about this story than the tracks, and why we're talking about it, is again how people responded when confronted with something they can't immediately explain. And again, just to kind of reiterate why I think this is such a fun place and time to look at, because some people initially were like, okay, yeah, these are the tracks I think it is. And other people were like, it's the devil. And it's just like a wonderful historic intersection of, different beliefs kind of like melding in one time. In many ways, the devil's footprints may be one of Britain's original urban legends. A strange event was witnessed by real people, amplified through newspapers, reshaped as it spread from town to town, and gradually transformed into something larger than life.
Like Candyman.
That's right. Every retelling added a little more mystery, a little more certainty, and a little more fear. We've seen this pattern before. It's the same process that gives us tales like Spring-Heeled Jack, Phantom Clowns, The Mothman, The Black-Eyed Children, and countless haunted roads and disappearing hitchhikers.
Don't forget about ghost trains.
I never would. One of my favorite urban legends. A kernel of truth becomes wrapped in rumor, folklore, and speculation until it's almost impossible to separate history from legend. And maybe that's why the devil's footprints continue to fascinate us. Not because they prove the supernatural, certainly, but because they remind us that people have always tried to make sense of the unknown. Sometimes we reach for science. Sometimes we reach for folklore. And sometimes all that's left behind are a few mysterious footprints in the snow and a story that keeps emerging.
I think all these stories are so interesting. Like, it's the epitome of like slow news day, where it's just like, we had some footsteps on our roof. Oh, I had some footsteps in my yard. Let's all get together and figure out which devil it was.
Yeah. And there's some, there's not like I cannot falsely claim that this is a huge horror trope, but there are some film interpretations.
Really?
There are. There is a 2016 film called The Devil's Footprints. Some of these are, of course,
top tier.
Like documentary, right? There's actually a segment of a show with George Takei that talks about it. Fiction that was inspired by it, so not like, documentary. We have Dark Was the Night from 2014, which was a film that was very loosely inspired by the Devon footprints. 7 Footprints to Satan from 1929.
7 Footprints to Satan.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great title.
Yeah. And then there's some that are like similar, right? The Jersey Devil from 1909. Which is just kind of like similar in its folklore. But let's look at 7 Footprints to Satan. Okay, it has almost 7 out of 10, which I feel like for a movie from 1929 is not bad. Before a planned African expedition, a man's fiancée worries that her father's guest plans to steal one of his rubies. The couple is kidnapped and held prisoner at a mysterious, creepy house. Strange things are afoot at Satan's house.
Oh, my stars.
Stars Thelma Todd. So maybe we'll have to give that one a watch.
Sounds too scary.
Well, Alan, that is all I have for you on the Devil's footprints or the Devon footprints of 1855. I know this one is a little bit, of a
Hard cracking news.
yeah, it's a little bit like light perhaps, but I've just been on this urban legend kick this summer, and this felt like something that kept coming up in different research that I was doing, and so, worth spending a little bit of time rounding it out.
I think if you write this up into your Substack, this is what's really going to win you the Pulitzer.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay, we get to work on that.
Please do. Just start conducting interviews of people who were there.
Okay, fabulous. As always, thank you all so much for being here and putting up with us. We appreciate you. Stay spooky, stay safe. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.